half of them are like hiring people just off of confidence and hope and prayer. You know what I mean? The best SEO in the world can't force Google to, rank them higher on Google. Like if you got a 3.8 star on like Google My Business, right? You're not going to be competitive. Cheaper to stay together. Like maybe like in marriage, like Google is just not as forgiving.
Sharp strategies, sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. I'm your host, Tiffany Swedensky, and today we are talking to Jason Hennessey of Hennessey Digital, or I just call him Hennessey, honestly. They're the SEO company I prefer working with, though I try not to stay loyal to any one company, but Hennessey does build an incredible website, very technically well-built websites. Their websites traditionally, in my experience, rank better than other law firm websites. So there's definitely a reason that they're known in this space, and you probably hear their name a lot, and they're usually at the top of almost everyone's recommendation list, or at least as far as I've seen. And I'm very happy to have Jason here on the show with me today and talk with him about digital marketing and whatever we're going to talk about. The landscape is limitless at this point. So thank you so much, Jason, for being on the show.
That is like the kindest thing anybody has ever said, Tiffany. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And it's an honor that comes from you because, you've got such a good reputation in the marketplace too. And you've helped so many other law firms. And so I appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say that.
If you don't mind, tell our guests, in case they don't know, I feel like they should know, but who you are and just a little bit about your company and what you all do.
So Hennessey Digital is a digital marketing agency with a core competency in working with law firms. We pride ourselves with working, with some of the biggest firms in the country, and we've made a lot of mistakes over the years and we've failed. But the beauty is that we learned from our failures and that has made us better each and every day. We're about 140 full-time employees and we just have this passion for digital marketing and trying to be better and helping people. And so it's just fun. I love what I do. I wake up every morning and that's the beauty of life, I guess.
I listen to you on other people's podcasts. Actually, you started the show by saying this was your only one. And I was like, I know that's not true. But I listened to you on a few other people's podcasts and you told the story about how you got started and kind of your approach to how you do things at Hennessey Digital. And one thing that I always really liked and I always felt that was really smart, and that's, I feel like, difficult to replicate like a small scale, like a one law firm scale. But you guys have like a lot of checks that you all run through each month. Like your team tests the forms, your team looks periodically at different parts of the site, and even the rollout of the site, there's a lot of, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess like gateways that the project has to pass through and checklists it has to meet. Tell me a little bit about like how you kind of built that, I guess, framework for your company.
Yeah. So it really starts based on how we operate, I guess, as an organization. Like SEO is one of those things where in most cases, human being typically makes a mistake on a website, right? Then you have somebody that comes in and diagnoses that mistake, right? They link to a broken page. Let's just say they didn't do it intentionally. They just did it like because they're working. And so then you have somebody else that diagnoses that mistake. And then we have a third party, which is a engineer that has to come in and like fix the mistake. Right. And so I got so sick of like the repetitive thing of somebody making a mistake, diagnosing it, fixing it. Right. In the perfect world, we have a strategy that if executed correctly works, but how do we prohibit people from making these mistakes? And so we basically really heavily invested into building out proprietary software that crawls websites like in real time, monitors for any issues like best practice SEO, but also the way in which we do things at Hennessey Digital, which is different than most other agencies, like the way in which we internally link pages and build our navigation. And we have a certain way of doing things. And if something gets done incorrectly, this crawl catches it, automatically creates a ticket to get fixed, which automatically gets fixed and then automatically gets QA'd. So we basically kind of built like a system. And it's not just that. Sometimes like I remember one time it was like a Saturday and I got a call from an angry client because somebody tried to call their phone number, but one digit was missing. A human being made a mistake. They forgot to put the one at the end of the phone number. And so when you pushed a button to call, it wasn't going anywhere. And so the client called me up really mad on a Saturday. And I had to take it, because we made the mistake and it probably cost them some cases as long as it's been like that. So Monday morning, I'm like, I assure you this will never happen again. I got my engineering team and we built a crawler that goes out and monitors every single one of our clients' websites to make sure that every phone number validates and that we don't ever make that mistake again, right? So it's just continuous learning and then just trying to improve things. And you become more efficient as an agency as a result of that.
You work with a lot of law firm owners, and I'm really curious, but just talking to them, like, what do you think they are getting wrong, I guess, about marketing and SEO, and what are they missing?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, sometimes they keep things siloed, right? You have like one agency that's doing all pay-per-click, and then you have another agency that's doing SEO and another agency that's doing video, right? And a lot of times these companies don't communicate with each other. And so I think that is a mistake. And I think regardless of if, like, I think it's perfectly fine to have different agencies doing different things. But I think it's so important that they're all on the same page, right? Because the video content that the video team's doing can serve as an asset to the SEO and the PPC team, right? And the strategy that you're doing for PPC could also help drive decisions to the SEO team, right? So I think that's one of the big mistakes that people are making. Other things like, for example, like just thinking that you can hire like one person to be your SEO strategy, I think is a miss. I think it's good to have somebody that kind of knows SEO, but to do SEO right, there's so much to it, right? There's the technical aspects of SEO, there's the link building asset, there's the content writing, it's the editing, there's just like digital PR, right? There's so many different aspects of it. Whether or not you hire an agency or you just bring in one person, I think you have to realize that it's more than a one person job to do it right. And so that's another mistake that I think I see people making.
Yeah, I mean, with something as complex as a website, and I mean, with something as definitely as complex as an entire law firm's marketing system, yeah, you really can't. That's not a one person job, and the disadvantage of one person is just their limited exposure to what's going on and what's working and what's not, and that's why mastermind groups are so important. That's why I think working with vendors is so important. I'm a very capable person. There's a ton of stuff. I could run a PPC campaign, right? But like, I'm not running enough to know exactly how to like make this work for a law firm. A lot of times these things are ever evolving. So like what works for PPC may only work for the next 16 months. And you have to be prepared for that next update or change or whatever. And that's hard to do as a solo person for sure.
I was gonna say, like, that is it. Like, if you bring somebody in that, manages PPC, sure, you could probably save a lot of money, right? If you have somebody that just comes in and manages a PPC campaign. But a lot of times you'll spend more in just the lessons that you learn versus working with a reputable agency that already manages millions of dollars per month for other law firms, because they're going to save you in the long run on a lot of the things that they've already tested, like negative keyword list and different unique strategies, like when it rains, we're going to bid aggressively, like there's all these different strategies that, a lot of times like one person might not be able to learn versus working maybe with an agency that might charge a little bit more, but on the grand scheme of things, it's cheaper in the long run. Yeah.
I think that's why it's important. And I mean, I don't really work with law firms that don't have an in-house marketing team. And the reason for that, like just broadly, is just because it's difficult for me as a fractional, and as somebody who's a CMO, mainly focused on strategy and results, to do stuff like as nimbly and as quickly as like somebody who's a marketing coordinator can. And something like what you mentioned, which is like, adjusting the bid strategy when it rains. That's something I'm not sure it works at all. And I'm not even saying it's a good idea, but it's one of the things that sounds really interesting if somebody gave you that idea from stage. But you couldn't really have an agency execute that for you if you wanted to because, they don't know when it's raining in your hometown. But, an in-house marketing coordinator dedicated to your business with a pulse on the now, definitely can. So, I mean, it's just the pros and cons and kind of trade-offs of like what you get with somebody in-house who's somewhat capable and what you could get working with a vendor.
I think it is important. We always like it best, truthfully, like when there is either a fractional CMO that we work with or, maybe like a marketing coordinator or something, right? Just because like there's usually like a lot of work to do, not just on behalf of the agency, right? But also the other side. You've probably been on calls with us where like we give our clients homework, right? And a lot of times, like if the partner of the firm shows up, we know that homework's probably not going to get done, right? But if we're working with someone like yourself or a coordinator at the company, like we know that there's a greater chance of them actually executing the homework that we give them.
I really like the homework you guys assign. I mean, there are a couple things I won't divulge them on here, but in my experience, like if we're talking about a law firm, it's like, oh, I want to get more results from my SEO. One of the first things I look at is how much they've engaged with SEO, like how much they've created for the SEO company, because it's not just a one-way relationship. And you have, like you said, important homework to do. And it takes if you're an owner, you're DIYing your marketing, you're the CMO, marketing coordinator, marketing assistant, it's going to take you a long time to do that homework. And you probably don't want to do it long term when you think about like, what do I, as a business owner, want my life to look like, right?
Yeah.
If you want to grow, like you have to have, those not just, a vendor to just do it, but you also have to start building the in-house marketing infrastructure. And I said this on somebody else's show, but the moment that you need to create a vector graphic for your logo is probably the moment you need a marketing assistant. No, it's not hard to do. But do I also see, an attorney who with a caseload and managing team members coordinating the creation of a vector logo? No. You can get an offshore, nearshore assistant to do that, or just take the leap and have somebody who can do like a lot of boots on the ground work.
Totally agree. Like some of the firms that we've been working with the longest, like I said, they have very loyal marketing teams, with a leader and there's loyalty on both sides. And that's just what makes the recipe work. So like, yes, 100%.
Thinking back to when I was just getting started in marketing, I'm telling on myself a little bit, but I remember the law firm owners telling me, like, we want you to manage the vendors. And I thought I knew what that looked like, which was essentially push the vendors for better results. Like, we want more, we're not getting enough cases. That's all I really knew how to do. Now, I get asked this all the time, like, how do we better manage our vendors? Because I'm a fractional CMO. People would ask me that. Let me ask you, how do you think a marketing department should manage their vendors? What should they be doing?
Yes. For one, truly understanding what the scope of work is that the law firm is paying for. I think first and most importantly, right? Just kind of understanding that. And then from there, kind of going in and just assessing the work, making sure that it aligns with the scope. And then hopefully, I think a marketing coordinator or CMO, holds the vendors accountable, right? You can't hold the vendors necessarily accountable to like the number of signed cases, like because there are variables that the vendor is not in control of, right? The vendor could help build out the strategy, right, to get more targeted traffic, which then turns into more leads, right? Which hopefully will turn into more cases, right? But if the law firm is getting the leads and not responding in a timely manner, or they're just not responding, right? That's part of it. The other side nowadays is the reputation of the law firm is also coming into question too. So like if they got a bunch of bad Yelp reviews and bad Glassdoor reviews and all these other things, you know what I mean? Like the best SEO in the world can't force Google to, rank them higher on Google. Like if you got a 3.8 star on like Google My Business, right? You're not going to be competitive, right? So like there are those variables, right? But at the end of the day, I think just holding the vendors accountable, making sure that the strategy is a good strategy. So being able to understand, SEO and PPC and social media marketing, because lawyers, that's a whole different language to them, right? Half of them are like hiring people just off of confidence and hope and prayer. You know what I mean? And like, sure, we'll give you $10,000 a month. Okay, great. I don't know what link building is, and I have no idea what a canonical tag is, but I trust you. You know what I mean? So I think it's somebody's job to come in and like articulate that in everyday language and hold the agency accountable to making sure that they do have the right strategy and they're executing it correctly.
I definitely know what you're talking about, some hope and prayer relationships. So when it comes to like SEO broadly, I feel like a lot of people have the impression that there are just some fixes they can apply to their website. And actually, I did a whole video yesterday on these pesky little AI generated audits of websites and how
Yeah.
they're basically inaccurate. I think about this a lot, but I mean, like, realistically, are there small things that can be done for a website that doesn't have any obvious problems that
Mhm.
can just like drastically improve performance? Or is it all like a long, slow burn?
I think it's really hard to tell because the way in which the Google algorithm works, right? You go in and you fix something and you think that you're going to be instantly rewarded for the fixes that you made. But a lot of times, like Google is not just as forgiven, right? It's not like the algorithm just like automatic. It's like, oh my God, thank you for making all these amazing changes. Like 2 hours later, you're like, you know what I mean? It might take 3 weeks before you see the impact of some of the changes that you made today to a website. But I can give you like clear examples, right? Like we were working with Top Class Actions, right? Scott Hardy. And so they came to us and they were seeing like a decline in traffic. And we looked at their website, and the website had a bunch of really bad internal redirects that were going through hops, right? So like it would go to the non-HTTPS, to the HTTPS, to the www, to the non, it was like 4 hops, right? And then they were being redirected. So there was all of that, right? And I think you lose a lot of link equity every time it goes through those hops. And then the other side is like, I mean, this site has like tens of thousands of pages, right? And so there was probably like actually hundreds of thousands of pages. And there was like over 10,000 pages that were like external links that were going to 404s and stuff like that. And so all we did was we wrote like a script, right, with rules. If this is a 301 redirect, follow the hops, go directly to replace the link, right? And so we fixed up all of the internal links. We fixed all of the broken links, right? And then we just continued to work on this for like 2 weeks and we fixed everything. And then sure enough, like a couple weeks later, Google just, man, that thing just lifted, right? So like something like that, just kind of cleaning up like some of the internal links and redirects and hops and fixing some of the broken links. You could like a lot of times people kind of neglect that stuff. And then the other thing I would say is just internal links, right? I think that's like the best thing that you can do to have a big impact on a website is just look at like internal links. You have a bunch of links that just say car accident lawyer that goes to a random blog post, right? I think if you kind of go in and look at like internal links and fix that, like I think that could have a really big impact.
Let me ask you, and it's kind of a different topic, but definitely something I feel like you have a unique take on. But I'm often coaching law firms about who they need to hire next for their marketing teams.
Yeah.
And if it's their first hire, if it's their first, marketing assistant, coordinator, whatever, they usually ask me, like, how much technical expertise do they need? And as a somewhat technical person myself, that's so hard for me to answer because on the one hand, I would say, technical expertise is kind of overweighted and you don't really need to be technical to send an email newsletter in MailChimp. But at the
Mhm.
same time, there's a tremendous value in having some competency with, digital marketing. How important is that for like your first marketer?
Candidly, I don't think if you're just hiring like your first person, you probably have a website that might have less than 100 pages of content on it, right? So it's not like your website is so overly complex that, this person's going to come in and like become a hero by fixing, that might be something you bring somebody in that has more general like marketing experience and can kind of be like a Swiss Army knife, right? And they can go out and hire maybe like a third party consultant once every 6 months to come in and do a technical audit where that's like their core competence, right? So, but yeah, I don't think that the very first hire should be somebody that is like a guru on like Screaming Frog and, technical SEO.
That's the one that people always reach for, and it's so high in demand and it is valuable, but I definitely agree. And often that person causes more problems than they solve because I've walked into situations where the first marketer who's digital marketer, I've been, the lock the company out of their Facebook pages, no
Oh,
index to site, just all sorts of nightmares. And it's just, one person that, and as you said earlier, you just have a tremendous amount of confidence in and hope for the first hire, like a practical problem solver and somebody who can execute and talk to people. That is really who you're looking for, marketing wise. It's so
yeah,
important.
I agree completely.
Right now, well, one, how do you rank an AI search? Let me just ask you that.
How do I, how
And
do
I'm
you,
kind
how do you rank in AI search? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and I'm kind of being silly with my question, but how do I get my brand to show up in AI search, Jason?
Got it. Boy, is that a loaded question. And
I know.
I just did a webinar on that. So there's so many different ways I could answer that, right? For one, like SEO serves as the foundation of all AI prompts, right? The answers to prompts using ChatGPT or any of the large language models, right? So you need to have a piece of content on your website that satisfies the intent of whatever it is that somebody's searching for either on Google or somebody's putting into a prompt, right? So that's the first thing, but from there, there's other variables. Like I did a whole case study today. I did a webinar where I did this long prompt, and the prompt was, my husband got into an automobile accident with a truck driver that fell asleep at the wheel. He's currently on life support. We don't know if he's going to make it. We want to hire the best trial lawyer to fight on the behalf of our husband because we need the financial resources to continue living if he doesn't make it, right? Something long like that. I mentioned that I was in Los Angeles, right? And so basically the long prompt generated the right response, right? ChatGPT can't give you the wrong answer there, right? Because if it steers somebody that's able to easily manipulate ChatGPT, boy, is that going to create a disaster for that person, right? If they just put them in touch with some phony lead gen guy, right, that's just going to try to get the lead and sell it to the right. That's not really what they want. So like what they're doing is basically they were able to show me the right law firms, right? Like Brian Panish was number one, right? And he's arguably probably one of the best trial lawyers in the country, not just in Los Angeles. And then I continue to ask it more questions. Why did you list this? Can you weigh this in the scale based on these four variables, right? And so from there, like it told me specifically, it's like this firm showed up because they serve on leadership, right? And they're also like on the trucking panels. They speak at conferences. On their website, it shows that they've gotten billion-dollar verdicts before with these specific cases, right? So continue to tell me like all of the reasons why this firm should be the first firm that shows up, right? But it's important that they had to have a website that you could pull the source from. And then there's all these other third-party variables, like what is the sentiment on Reddit about the firm? What is the sentiment on Glassdoor? Like, what is the sentiment on Yelp? All these different places. So it really, what happens is when you do a search on Chat or a prompt on ChatGPT, it's kind of going out and creating like maybe 80 different instances of other results that it's pulling back in to try to come up with the right answer, right? So that's a very long-winded way of me kind of answering your question. But if you want to watch the webinar I just did today, just go to Hennessey.com, click on free webinars, and there's a whole hour-long session that I talk about this.
I do want to go watch that. One of the marketing programs, I guess you would call it, that I always try to get my clients on board with is Reddit marketing.
Yeah.
And, I summarize this by saying, like, treat Reddit like you would treat LinkedIn. Show up authentically, establish your expertise, leave comments, build karma. And there are more agencies popping up that'll help you do this. But And I feel like it's a hard pitch though. Like when I bring it up to a lot of attorneys, they're like, "Ew, Reddit?" Because, there's preconceived notions about what Reddit is. And I mean, and they're mostly true. Reddit's a platform that's really young and really skeptical of marketing in general. So it's a place where it's hard to fake, that kind of authenticity,
Yeah.
which, might be why, Google and ChatGPT rely on it. The idea that personal brand and building up and reinforcing your personal brand is actually maybe a little bit more important than the law firm brand. I don't know, but it's definitely kind of exciting. I mean, I know a lot of people, SEO has definitely changed. I don't feel like it's controversial to say, but also I feel like that's exciting. It doesn't mean it's ended, but things are changing. It's kind of a pivot, and we're looking at platforms we didn't even think about before. I would have definitely been slapped down if I talked to somebody about Reddit like 2 or 3 years ago.
Strategy for a law firm. I totally agree. Like, like Reddit would be a great place where gamers talk about like video games or something. You know what I mean? Like all these different subreddits, right? But nowadays, like anytime you do a Google search for something and you see Reddit on the first page of the search result, that means you should be paying attention to that, right? That's like Google is the best tool for SEO, right? And a lot of people like ignore it. Like the people also ask questions. You click on one, it takes you down three more. You click on that, right? Grab that information. That's content that Google is giving to you. You need to be basically addressing that content, writing it into text format, creating videos about that content, right? If you see super lawyers ranking on the first page of Google, right? And the number one result for Los Angeles truck accident lawyer, you probably should associate your law firm with that super lawyers page if you can. If you see Justia ranking in position number 3, right? You probably should associate your website with a listing on that, right? A lot of times, like I'm a big salesperson for a lot of these legal directories, not because of the direct benefit that the law firms get. It's not like they're going to get hundreds of cases per month because they're on like FindLaw or Justia. But sometimes just being listed on Justia, right, which is a DR website of like 82 and it has a strong link and a citation and it's trustworthy, that could give you the edge of ranking higher on ChatGPT or Google when somebody types in like who's the best truck accident lawyer in Los Angeles, right? So it's the indirect value that carries the weight.
Kind of my favorite, least favorite conversations to have because I feel like it reveals the complex nature of marketing. It's like we should get a Justia listing. It's like, why? Is it going to get us leads? It's like, no. But, and then have to explain like the connection to this, to this, to this. And of course, we're making a lot of assumptions when we're talking about these things. And again, it's an ever changing, ever moving field. And an algorithm update comes tomorrow and turns all of what we were trying to do on its head. That's difficult. But, that it's with digital marketing and even just marketing in general, like, what we do over here affects this over here and then this over here. And you have to be mindful of those connections because that's what I see a lot with website marketing in general is you change this over here and all of a sudden everything else down the chain is just broken.
Sure.
And, if
Yeah.
you're not checking for it, and just it happens.
Some of the worst things I see, like talk about like horror stories. Sometimes a law firm might leave us, right, to go work with maybe a different agency that designs really nice websites. And so then they take over the website and they redesign it and they get rid of all of the way in which we interlink things. And next thing you know, it's just like, oh my God, it's just like a disaster. And like all of the investment, years and years of investment just kind of gets wiped out over a couple of weeks, right? Just because they didn't realize the impact that a lot of the sidebar navigation and everything else was kind of doing there. So that really pains me. I look at websites like, months later, I'm just like, oh my God, like just with a phone call, I could at least prevented them from making that mistake. And then the other one too is, when lawyers separate from each other, right? When you have one partner and another partner and they kind of, for whatever reason, go a different route. And, one partner takes over the website and, you know what I mean? And they try to rebrand it. And anyway, like that's just can be a mess too, because there's just so much stuff to kind of go in and clean up when you got years and years and years of a law firm that has been known as this brand and now they're known as this brand. It's like, anyway, that's just it. It's cheaper to stay together. It's like maybe like in marriage too, right? Than them to separate like that because, oh my God, it's so painful. Like Google is just not as forgiving with stuff like that.
In my view, it's better not to make the switch in most cases, unless there's a very obvious reason why. There's some sort of what is an analogy about switching horses midstream, but like there's momentum when you're working with one person, one vendor. And when that breaks, quite a lot breaks and you don't really realize it. And if you're running a business, running a law firm, and you've just mentally outsourced marketing to like this one company, you just aren't aware of what's going on behind the scenes. And if you think about how marketing meetings go, they'd be really boring. It's like, by the way, we're continuing to do this and this and this and this and this. And it just becomes annoyance you don't listen to.
Like that's the biggest thing I think is like with SEO, it's like there's not really like a new magic, it's not like a magic trick where every time we get on a call, we're going to show you like a new trick, right? I apologize. Like, you know what I mean? You've been in my mind reading room before, right? You know how I'm able to kind of understand what your favorite movie is. You know what I mean? Like, you know how I pull this rabbit out of the hat. It doesn't work like that. And so sometimes like month after month after month after month, I get it. You're writing more content, you're building more links, you're fixing the technical SEO. I get it, right? But just over time, that's just what it is, right? It's just continuing doing more of the same, I guess.
I can't relate as much with websites. I built a few websites in my day, but those websites, can't say there's been a website that's been my baby. Maybe a few, I don't know. But for me, it's CRMs and just the absolute complexity that can be a CRM and how data is transmitted back and forth. Honestly, I get kind of aggravated at attorneys and law firms because when we talk digital marketing to an attorney, like me and you, most of the time it's SEO, it's Google, it's, very narrow focus, but digital marketing and the website is just way so much broader than that. And it's very frustrating. And all of these systems are complex and feed your intake. And, it's a lot. It's a lot for a small business owner.
No, it really is. Yeah. We've worked with firms that were still doing like pen and paper as their CRM. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, it's like, yeah. So that's super important. Anytime we can get a law firm to recognize that that's one of the first things that they got to fix, even before they invest in us. That's just the way it works. So
yeah, marketing is just built on just systems built upon systems. That's what's fun and exciting about it.
Just the good data to make good decisions, right? So,
well, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show. Just to wrap up a little bit, was there anything that we didn't end up talking about that's been on your mind that you want to go over a little bit?
No, Tiffany, I appreciate you having me on as a guest. Like I said, I'm all about education. So if you'd like to learn more about some of the stuff that we talked about on a much, higher, I guess, detailed level, you can just go to Hennessey.com and click at the top under free webinars. And I think there's like 5 or 6 webinars that are each an hour long that we did. And so we cover things like how does AI work? How to rank higher in AI? Like what, so things like that. And so definitely go check that out for sure.
I actually can't believe I haven't seen those yet. I need to go. Go watch some of that material. Well, where do you want people? Well, you mentioned the website. Is there any place you want people to look you up or learn more about you, follow you?
Well, for certain, definitely follow Tiffany on LinkedIn because her content is amazing. And so I would say that's probably the one place that I really spend a lot of time and I like to share some of my lessons in life there. Yeah, just follow me on LinkedIn would probably be the best place. Yeah.
I appreciate it. I work hard on my LinkedIn in spurts. Hopefully I can schedule enough content where I don't have to pay attention to it every day, but really appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, Jason. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see y'all next time.